What's up, ladies and gentlemen? This is DH Thorne here. Well, the day has finally come. I've run out of things to talk about, so I'm going to start doing numbered list videos. All right, so this is 5 things that can be toxic to your progress in magic. And they're sort of in an order, but I wouldn't say that they're strictly in an order, but I'm going to be reading them to you from the least important to the most important. The first one that comes to mind is arbitrary/universal morality, assuming the universe has a sense of good and evil. This comes up every now and then, especially for people on the left-hand path. Everybody walking around in this world has a sense of right and wrong because each one of us dwells in a paradigm in which there is something that is best for us or worse for us. Nobody wants to experience a bad day. Nobody wants to have a loved one get hurt. No one wants to have their power taken away. No one wants to be enslaved. Nobody wants to be ridiculed or mocked. All of these things give us various forms of discomfort and displeasure. Now, of course, many things are related to our identity with ego. Those people who have successfully managed to transcend ego, I have to tell you that such a person, they still have days where they privately curse to themselves when they stub their toes. When something doesn't go the way they want, they may still frown. They don't look upon a person being hit by a bus and go, oh good, the universe gets its way. There is always a sense of, I wish that didn't happen. That little I that says, I wish this, I wish that, that is always the sense of ego making that decision. There's nothing wrong with this identity, illusory as it is, having a preference. That is partially why we're here. That is partially why, as a non-dual source knowing, we have limited ourselves and forgotten our true nature so that we can have this embodied experiences, so that we can have a sense of this is great, this is not great, because it's a bigger adventure. It's more fun, okay? But the universe, the non-dual source itself, does not have an arbitrary, universal sense of morality or justice or right or wrong. This is disheartening to some of you who are deeply trapped and entrenched in your ego delusion, because for you, it's really important that your actions be superior to other people. You don't realize this because you've sort of been taught the backwards mentality of you're a good person because you do good things. So it sort of challenges you when someone suggests to you that the good things you do don't make you moral and thus do not inflate your ego in that way. And so this is why this idea of morality is delusional and it's illusional. It's an illusion. That doesn't mean that ethics, now I separate the two. Now, obviously that's a little bit of, not sophistry, but semantics maybe for some people. Some people conflate the two as the same, morality and ethics. I don't. I see morality, at least arbitrary morality, at least dogmatic morality, as something that comes from the external world that you just kind of accept based on what people tell you, a moral authority, your priest, your pastor, me, somebody else. Our society at whole, your college teacher that tells you that you have to hate certain genders or something because they have more privilege or something. These kinds of arbitrary universal morality issues, they rob you of your own sort of, agency. You are really capable of having an ethical and rational perspective on why things are ethically preferable to things which are morally required. So in a recent stream, there was the discussion of, well, I can't really bring up the exact thing, but various, sexual misconduct and, rape, murder, all that stuff. And how the universe doesn't care about that. It bothers some people to know that there is no truistic justice. It doesn't exist. That means it's up to us as individuals to determine what is ethically appropriate and then prosecute that in our lives not with a judgmentalism that says that person is inferior because they do this and they need to blah, 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 but to rather recognize, Morticia Adams said, what is order for the spider is chaos for the fly. Well, if we're a bunch of spiders, then what is best for us as individuals, as family units, as friend circles, as communities, and so on, as we get further from the self, that changes and it becomes more broad. And when it comes personal, it's more specific. So what is best for me generally is going to be best for a large number of people. That is to say, I want to live in a world with enough safety so I don't have to worry about being murdered in my sleep, but just enough risk so that there's adventure and that there's challenge and that there's a reason to always hone my skills in things that would protect me or assure that I am better today than I was yesterday at something that gives me protection or life or food or whatever. There needs to be a struggle, we'll say. So I don't want to live in a world that is so perfectly balanced and moralistic and equal that there is nothing to strive for because all you have to do is breathe and you have everything handed to you. That is not living, okay? That is being a plant in a fucking tube that is being fed water and all this other crap. I don't want to live in a world where there's no risk of a bad person harming me. I know that sounds crazy to some of you, but I don't want to live in that world. I just don't, because then I have no incentive to be cautious. If I remove the number of dangers and threats, the overall need for me to have radar that picks up on dangers in my life gets that much less important, till eventually humanity could evolve into a species of dullards that just walk around and walk into traffic and stuff. You know what I mean? If we don't have risks, we don't have that. Now, without risks, we also don't have chances to look beyond the ego. This is a little tougher for some people to understand. But when you take a chance in life, when you do something that is risky, you are sort of saying, well, my ego, my identity is not that important. Now, whether that's an existential risk or not, obviously I'm making it sound like it, but if I risk all of my life savings, that's helping to reduce my attachment, which we're going to get to in a minute, by the way, to something. And so without the risk, I don't have that exercise of showing perspective on what has value and why, and what things are important to me. Arbitrary morality, when executed, when we have arbitrary morality and we run that through the system and say this is a universal law, murder is universally a sin, whatever it is, okay? You are creating a scenario in which the universe, it's just not realistic. It's just not what's happening. Even what I'm saying to you may sound like a morality, but it's actually an ethical choice that I've decided. I've looked at the universe and I've said, what serves me? Morality doesn't serve me, but ethical things do. Now, this influences your magic because without having the openness to explore things that are immoral, at least intellectually, you don't have to act them out. I don't have to murder somebody to explore murder. I don't have to, whatever, any of those horrible things that I talked about. I don't have to physically go and do them to explore them and seek my own shadow, find out what makes me tick. Maybe I have an urge to do one of these things that other people would consider immoral. I mean, I hesitate to say so because that gets you in trouble in the community, in the world. But if we're being frank, sincere, and honest, every single person that ever rolled off the assembly line has had morbid thoughts, immoral thoughts, things that society would frown on. If we could all see into each other's mind, we would all see something that would offend us, okay? So if you have a strong sense of morality that is not based on rational ethics, that is to say, if morality is superior to your ethics, if morality is arbitrary and universal, you have taboos. And taboos create a gigantic roadblock to you in exploring things magically, spiritually, etc. There is a vast, untapped field of spiritual and magical potential that exists within the world of the taboo. That doesn't mean that we act on all of it, that we embrace all of it, or that we forgive things. I have a saying, rabid dogs do need to be put down from time to time. When you have a rabid dog that's tearing its way through your community, you may love that dog. That dog may be good otherwise, and it may not even be guilty of anything deep. Maybe it's just insane, but that rabid dog has to go. If you have a rapist and a murderer in your presence, you could be a potential target. Just because that dog loved you a minute ago doesn't mean it's going to love you forever. Ethically speaking, rationally speaking, pragmatically speaking, I've got to deal with that, because what's best for me, because I have to go that way, is to deal with that. Same thing for you. So I don't tolerate the things that I'm willing to explore mentally, spiritually, etc. Give you an example, and we'll end on this because this is running a little bit long. Doing a good curse on someone, especially a curse that's going to hurt them, requires that you be willing to murder them if there was absolutely no chance of being caught. Like, imagine you could press a button and no one would know you did it, and that person dies. If you have a moral or ethical reason not to do that, then your black magic is going to be potentially inferior. It's potentially not going to have as much punch. It's potentially not even going to work. If you're not willing to do the thing, then what is the point of doing the rituals? What is the point of looking at them even? You know, there's a lot of people who, if they were handed the opportunity to do it without getting caught or anyone ever finding out except for them, they wouldn't do it. They might want to, but they wouldn't do it. Well, then they'll go off and then do a death curse. I've run into these people, and it really kind of wobbles my mind. I go, if you wouldn't be willing to do this with nobody catching you, then why are you willing to do it in magic? What's the difference? You're still kind of asking for their death or their removal from your life. What's the difference? So I think that morality, at least arbitrary, abject, universal morality, is a stumbling block. It's a toxic element of your character that will be an impediment to progressing in magic. Again, not saying you should do all of the things that people consider immoral. What I'm saying is they're not universally, the universe doesn't care about murder or any of these other bad things. The universe is going to keep on trucking because that's the point, okay? Murder is necessary for not murder to matter. Think of it that way. Okay, number 4, not trusting your imagination or being too mechanical. This is one big one that I see the most with the beginner. Beginners come into magic and they look at their rituals and they worry, did I do it right? Their first question, the first problem that they have, the biggest fear, the thing that holds them back is they'll spend, like I knew this one person that they would not even think about calling upon King Paimon unless they had the sigil drawn perfectly, proportionately perfectly. They wanted to make sure they had the right one because there's a little variation between a couple of different, sources. They had to be 100% sure that King Paimon's sigil was the right, perfect one because they were convinced it would be either disrespectful or not work without it. And then I've known people who, whether they jump through all the hoops or not, they've done ritual and then they've just sat there in complete silence and ignored mountains of potential physical and psychosomatic manifestations that if I was in the room, I'd go, oh, there he is. They could watch this incense smoke billowing up and they'd ask a question and it might flicker and they won't even notice it. Now, I'm not even saying that the incense smoke was the answer. I'm saying they don't use or trust their imagination. Or they'll tell me, well, I did a ritual and I asked President Marbas for healing. And then I sat there in silence and I didn't hear anything. That's the big one. I didn't hear or see anything. That's usually what they'll say. I didn't hear or see anything. And I couldn't make my mind quiet down. All I could think about was, going to the doctor and getting checked out and blah, 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 blah. Or they'd try to work with, I don't know, we'll say Clawneck. And they're like, well, I tried to reach out to Clawneck. I need financial help and assistance. And I sat there and I didn't see or hear anything. Nothing bumped in the room. The candle didn't wiggle. No incense happened. And nothing happened. And I'll say, well, did you intentionally try to imagine them yet? Did you role play your interaction with them? People have been taught that magic is like a cheat code, okay? The analogy of magic being a cheat code, while fair to an extent, to a very limited extent, is true. The idea of it being a cheat code robs you and damages you, because all too often, the idea of it being a cheat code means that you have to do it right. Anybody know the Konami code, up, up, down, down, left, right, BA, select, start? Or just BA, select, start. That's an old code that you'd put in Nintendo games when it was a Konami game. It usually gave you unlimited lives in Contra and stuff like that. And if you didn't do it just right, you obviously had to hit all the buttons just right. Nothing would happen if you did it wrong. And people think that magic works that way, that you have to get this right, that right, this right, that right. They don't trust their imaginations to do most of the work. Your imagination is, if you recall my methodology, magic requires a trinity of self, a trinity of wholeness, a trinity of action. You need mental component, spiritual component, and a physical component. You do need something physical. You can't live in a universe where there is no physicality. You can't live in a universe where there's no spirituality or no mentalism. Maya requires the three to be there in some capacity. There is something going on physical. So in order for you to do your magic, you need something physical. Maybe that something physical is just you. Maybe it's just your body. Maybe it's you and your lover doing a sex ritual. Get rid of that morality, by the way. Maybe it's you in the woods and you pick a stick up off the ground and you draw a circle and you stand in it and you do your ritual that way. Or maybe it's an elaborate setup with all kinds of cool stuff and you have like tons of crystals and candles. Also valid. Maybe the ritual book says you need 5 candles of this and 4 things of incense and this kind of crystal and that kind of idol and blood and blah, 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 blah. And, eye of newt and scale of toad and all kinds of goofy stuff. And you're looking for all this and you can't source half of it and you go, well, I guess I can't do it. Of course you can do it. Of course you can. That physicality is only a small portion of it. It's an equal portion, but it's only one of the 3 components. And it's not that those pieces themselves are required. So this becomes a toxic part of your magic when you put too much weight on the mechanics of magic and you don't put enough on your imagination. One of my common practices to do, I have a ritual chamber or ritual setup that is aesthetically appealing to me. That is important because that helps my imagination run away with itself. That helps me to create a mental space which magic is real. When I go into my ritual chamber and there's no more unnatural lighting, it's all candles, or if it is natural lighting, it's mood lighting and just specially done, UV lights or colored lights or something like that. If I go into my ritual chamber when it's lit up right, I have candles everywhere, incense is smoking, my idol is there ready to go. My room is dark. Maybe I've got black everywhere. Everyone's different, like what they require for it to look like. I'm dressed in my robes. I feel like I'm in a magical space and my mind, my imagination, my creativity is allowed to play. It opens up all of the potential in my imagination to do what it needs to do. Imagination, very important. Then I will imagine my ritual space is an astral temple or some kind of really wild, far out spiritual plane where my ritual temple is there and the artifacts around it are representing things in the astral, so that my idol that is on my humble little altar, or my nicer one, or whatever I've got, that idol, even if it's just a little wax figure that I made myself, or a drawing, or a crystal that I've devoted to that spirit, or to my intention for that matter, in the astral, that may be an idol, but it might be a glorious statue, or maybe it's glowing, or maybe it's moving and it's animated, or maybe my altar becomes like a throne and my spirit is sitting in it, or maybe when I do the ritual, a portal opens up and the spirit walks into my astral plane mentality and I see it there. Again, I am not waiting for that. I am intentionally creating that. You need to go from this position of waiting and receiving to actively and intentionally creating with your imagination the manifestation you want to see. This is why so many magical systems emphasize visualization. They don't just mean visualize. They mean whatever your method is. If you can't visualize, like you're like me, you can only get little blinks and flashes. You can't visualize as clearly as other people, but you can verbally visualize, if that makes sense. You can mentally imagine with vocabulary, or just know it's there somehow. I can't describe what I see because, necessarily when I'm imagining things, because it might not be visual. I just know they're there. I'll be telling someone there's a brazier over there with flame coming out of it, and the spirit is standing there. So I don't see that, but I know it's there. Okay, I know that's really hard for people to understand who are visual thinkers. But those of you who aren't visual thinkers probably know what I mean. So I will have this astral space, and I will imagine things happening which would be impossible in my physical space, and I let them be there. And I role play my interactions. If I summon a spirit like Lucifer, I will play both sides of the conversation if I have to, until I get a response from myself that I don't recognize as coming from myself. That is to say, that wasn't D.H. Thorne saying that. That was an inspired statement, and I don't know who or where it comes from. I'm going to trust it was from Lucifer. And at some point, you won't even know you'll know it's Lucifer talking through your inner voice. It might even take on a different voice from your own. You just let it go. But that's how you do it. You got to create that bridge. You got to meet them halfway between your reality and that astral one. You've got to create that bridge, and then let go of the idea that some of that is you. Let go. Let them manifest in your imagination. That's the only way it's going to work. Okay, number 3. Power seeking and manifestation obsession. If you're doing magic, there's different schools of thought on this. One school of thought is magic is like a science, and you've got to keep doing it till it works every time, and blah, 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 blah. And I challenge those people who claim to have this power, where they can do magic ritual and like clockwork get what they want in a testable way. I challenge them to go take the James Randi challenge, or whatever equivalent is still out there. Go take their challenge, and then you won't have to do a ritual for money anymore. Hell, do a ritual for money, because it's $1 million prize, then go take the James Randi challenge, do a ritual that will prove that it's true, blah, blah, blah. Do it all. Put your money where your mouth is. Put your reputation where your belief is. I do every day. I don't hesitate to tell you what I believe is possible and what I think is less likely than possible. But that doesn't mean that I say don't do it. Magic should never be seen as a gimme, gimme kind of tool. It's not meant to be a thing which gives you power over the world or allows you to manifest your obsessions into material truth. Magic is a kind of meditation or yoga. It's a performance art. And if it's done sincerely from the place where the ego is used as a tool rather than the ego is identified as the self, when the ego is your tool and you're using your ego as a character to role play through, when you see through your ego and you just let the ritual happen, and you don't care if you get an outcome or not, surprisingly enough, something about that means that you'll have more synchronistic manifestation than you'll know what to do with. That doesn't mean you will get to the letter what you ask for. It doesn't mean that your ego's heart's desire will be fulfilled every time you have something. What it means is that When your intention is not to force the universe to give you what it wants, you're more inclined to go with the flow of what your higher self is doing through this avatar. And so when you're doing the ritual is more likely to be smooth, more in alignment with your true intention. If you think your ego's desires, when you're seeking power, when you're seeking specific manifestation, when that is your intention, when that is what you think is what you're doing, you're setting yourself up for failure after failure. It doesn't mean you won't ever get it, because you do. It's only when you start to think you have power over the world that you find out how powerless you really are. And it's only when you give in to that and then practice magic as a performance art, a way to just let your energy flow and just do the ritual and commune with the spirits and just make it a game. Let it be a fun thing that you do. You will wake up one day and go, every single thing that I needed magic to do, it did. Every single thing. Yes, maybe I did a ritual for financial freedom and I only made $500 one week, and then I didn't make anything for 6 months, and blah, 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 blah. But you know what? I'm looking at where I am, and I've got 20 grand in the bank, and I'm feeling good. I can buy a house. I'm not worried if there's a recession too bad. I've got some other stuff. Maybe I'm not a millionaire. Maybe I'm not, but I feel secure a little bit. It somehow happened. It happened in drips and drabs along the way that I didn't notice because I trusted it. I let magic do as it will. And that's a great thought. Magic, do as you will. Watch The Last Unicorn movie. Very cute little children's movie, but very important message in there. Magic, do as you will. Trust Maya to do as it will. Stop fighting the flow. Try to become part of the flow. Now people say, that doesn't sound like left hand, Thorne. Left hand's all about power and all. Left hand being about power may be true, but being about power doesn't mean that D.H. Thorne is given the power. The power is already manifesting D.H. Thorne. The power is already manifesting you. You are already a manifestation of that power. How can the manifestation of power take the power? Thorne, that sounds like right hand. Only if you are in submission to another being. If you see another being as separate from you, and you submit, yes, Lord God Jesus, then you are on the right hand. When you recognize that you are that power, when that power is what you are, then you are truly operating as a deity. And your avatar is this. Right? If you are operating as a deity and this is your avatar, how dare your avatar stand in the way of what your higher self wants? Let go a little bit. Now that leads us to number 2, attachment. Attachment is what our ego identity does. Our ego identity, because it is also your imagination, okay? It's an imagined character that you forget that you're not. You think that all you are, I mean, you are that character, but that character is not all you are. You're all characters. And all characters are made up. They're all stories. You're playing all of them. You're playing all the parts in the play at the same time. And the ego attaches to its story. And the components of its story are its hardships, its desires, its struggles, its fears, its loves. When you have a whole fuck ton of attachment, you also become attached to the outcome of your magic, going back to number 3, that power-seeking manifestation. When you're attached to the outcome of your magic, you don't release whatever energy you manage to free up by doing the ritual, and the chance of that ritual having some kind of a really cool synchronistic result is even smaller because you're so attached to the problem. You think you're solving the problem, right? This is kind of like worry. It's a kind of worry. When you sit there worrying about a problem, does that solve it? I'm not saying that you'll never have a solution come to mind while you're worrying. But worrying itself doesn't solve the problem. Thinking about it can help, but also taking time off from a problem helps. Obviously, if there's a train coming at you and you have 3 seconds to get out of the way, you worry about it and you jump out of the way. But if all you do is worry about it, you're going to get run over, right? So worry, attachment is like worry. When you're attached to your problems, all it does is cause a kind of suffering and retention. This retention makes it so that whatever spiritual journey you're on, you're going to feel every bump in the road. An analogy would be like this. When you're riding a horse, I don't know how many of you guys have ever done horseback riding. When you're riding a horse, when it's walking along, it's fine. You sit in the saddle, you feel a little motion, you should try to keep your body in motion with the horse, but it's not moving that bad, so you don't have to do much. As it goes faster, you have to start moving your hips to match the horse a little bit so that there's not a lot of difference between the saddle and your butt, we'll put it that way. Once the horse starts going into a gallop, you can no longer sit with your butt in the saddle. You got to lift up and you've got to stand up in the stirrups and hold on with your legs. Just like when you're trying to pedal a bike really fast, you got to stand up. You've got to do that so that you're on a pivoting set of knees and hips that will allow you to not impact the saddle, because when that thing's galloping, you're getting spanked by the saddle, and it can hurt, especially for a guy, by the way, when certain things collide with the hard saddle. It's really uncomfortable, okay? Attachment is much like this. When you're attached to your problems and your life and your ego and all of this, it is exactly the same. Not exactly the same, but metaphorically the same as being attached to the saddle when the horse is galloping. You need to be fluid and go with that flow and have good shock absorbers and just be like, all right, this is what it is. And my magic failed, that's okay. The suffering, the failures I've had since coming back to magic again, would have utterly destroyed my ability to do it when I was younger, because I had way too much success when I was younger. At least I thought I did. Maybe it was delusional. The failures I've had recently have knocked me for a loop, okay? But I haven't lost touch. And if anything, they're purifying my attachment. They're reminding me, stand up in the saddle, Thorne. You're sitting in I'm tongue-tied to my own name. You're sitting in the saddle. You're not standing in it, and that's why you're feeling this discomfort. You are galloping along. You haven't stopped galloping. Your higher self is still galloping towards something. You're still heading towards amazing things, but you're sitting in the saddle and it hurts. Stand up in the saddle. It's okay if your rituals don't manifest what you want. It's okay if things don't go the way you want. It's okay if people in your life die that you love. It's okay. Remember, number 5, there's no abject morality. What died was a body. Their spirit, their soul, their identity, their idea is still there. You can contact it any kind. Yeah, maybe it won't feel as alive to you because it's not talking back to you, but they're only gone when you forget them, right? All you're missing is that interaction. And that interaction can be there if your imagination's vivid enough. Trust that imagination, number 4. Let go or be dragged is the other way it's said. Okay. Number 1. The single most toxic thing that will ruin your magical experience: superstition and dogma. This would be religiosity, doctrinal, canonical, ritual as written mentality, superstition, looking at spirits and being superstitious about them. Superstition as a term is a little hard to pin down in practice. What I mean by that is, on some level, we have to adopt a story to do what we do. We have to play with belief. We have to accept some things as true, even if only delusionally so, in order to do magical actions. In other words, I know that Lucifer, the entity, is not what is really what people think it is, but I still work with that egregoric manifestation of Lucifer because I like it. And because when I do, I feel this pull and this expansion of internal awareness and freedom. Lucifer, for those of you who don't know, is a mistranslation when the Bible was in Greek and it started being translated to other languages. Greek, Latin, etc. When it was being translated around, the word Lucifer was a title for a king. And this mistranslation kind of happened around the year 300. And it kind of blew up. And it became syncretized with Satan. Lucifer and Satan were syncretized. They're not the same entity. They are of the same archetypal aspect. They're both adversarial. They both have adversarialness in their nature. They are both adversaries of dogmatism and religiosity. They are both there to be adversarial to systems. They're both rebellious. And in that way, they're very much the same. They are in the same spiritual family, if you will, but that becomes a superstition when you say they're spiritually in the same family. Oh, which one's the brother? Which one's the father? Which one's the mother? Which one's the human-centric nonsense? That's superstitious. Understanding Lucifer as a spiritual egregore / mental construct thought form, understanding this, while that is still a belief and thus potentially dogmatic, if you haven't discovered it for yourself, is way more liberated than assuming Lucifer is a fallen angel that God cast out of heaven and by working with him you're doomed to hell, or Lucifer is really God and Yahweh is really the devil and you're somehow one of the good guys. See number 5, by the way, with this whole good and evil bullshit. When you're living in this superstitious world, you enter problems. Now this becomes toxic to your magic because just like the morality issue, you're limited to your superstition. You're limited to your dogma. You also run into more problems with others who practice. I can't tell you how often people that are following the left-hand path, particularly theistic demonolators, who literally worship demons, seeing them as higher beings than themselves, falling down, yes, oh King Paimon, you are greater than me. These people do the exact same bullshit that Christians do. If you watch like I do, if you participate in these communities and you watch how these people bicker back and forth, well, King Paimon should never be female. How dare you say his crown was anything other than gold? You didn't see a crown, well then you didn't see King Paimon. This is all bullshit, and it ruins any spiritual progress that they might have made because it becomes another dogmatic religion, no different than the bullshit Christianity that they've reasonably, ejected from. You left limiting Christian dogma where you have to go to church every Sunday and worry about the 7 sins and the 10 this and the 10 commandments and the blah, blah, blah. And you got all this bullshit that was crushing your soul into this confined little space. You eject from that going, I'm looking for spiritual freedom. And then what do? You take the yoke of one deity off and you grab another one and put it right back on. Just this one's black and has spikes on it. You feel edgy and therefore it's okay. You can fuck whoever you want because Asmodee's into sex. It's fine then. You're so much freer, but you better not use the wrong incense with Asmodee. Oh no, you've offended him. Watch out, he's going to come for you now. You can tell why this is number 1 for me. Because when I see this, it's not that I look down, it's that I empathize with them too much. And I feel that crushing weight of control and right-hand manipulation, and it really burns my ass when I see it. I'm always polite about it when I encounter these people, of course, but here in my space, I'm going to say what the fuck I want, and I think that's ridiculous. And I'm not saying that dogmatically. I'm saying that from experience. So what's dogma? So a lot of people confuse dogma with belief. Belief and dogma are not the same thing. Dogma is arbitrary belief, belief that's been handed to you that you have not personally vetted and experienced for yourself. And I will say that non-dogmatic thinking tends to be a more open mentality because anything that you believe, There's always a back door for you to reopen and examine that again. I am always willing to re-examine what I'm saying about the spirit world. I began this talking a little bit more, just a little bit more like a demonologist. Over the last 2 years, I'm still in full affirmation that spirits are real. It's just rather than seeing them as energy beings that like somehow manifest this and that, I see them now as something that is more integrated psychologically and psychosomatically with this illusion of Maya. They're still there, they still matter, they're still alive, you can still talk to them. They still can have influence on your experience. But they themselves are not a separate unit of reality apart from the rest of you. They're a part of you. You can find them inside yourself. You don't have to find them in the candle, in the incense, in the ritual. You don't need any of that. You can communicate. Look, Christians do it all the time, and they're not wrong. They just sit down and say, please, God, hear my prayer. You can do this to any spirit. Whether it responds to you or not, that depends. It doesn't require ritual, but ritual is a great way to open up that portal in your imagination, going back to number 4. Ritual is a great way to open that imagination and allow your imagination to run wild and to have a vivid conversation with the God that you want to talk to. And if even 50% of it is not from you or strictly from you, that's amazing to me. That's a holy grail in your hand. Sure, 50% of it might be a miscommunication or your own imagination and not the spirit, or you just made it up. So what? 50% is true. If it's 50% divine inspired, that's better than 0 by a lot, right? So be okay with that. Leave dogma and superstition to the right hand. Chaos magicians would tell you not to be dogmatic or superstitious. And in that, I agree with them fully. I may not agree with every single technique they use, but I don't have a problem with them. I think they're fine. Use them. I may not agree with all of the mechanical ideas that they have for why or how to do things, but that one thing specifically really speaks to me. Superstition and dogma is counter. It runs counter to spiritual liberation and power. And power seeking runs counter to finding power, to finding you are that power. When you're superstitious and dogmatic, you believe that power is external to yourself. When you erase all dogma and superstition, you recognize that you're basically in a very vivid daydream and that you have created all of this in a way of thinking. Anyway, I'm not saying that it's not real. What I'm saying is that what you think is real is not real. I know. That's another video in itself. When you're in this delusional paradigm, when you realize that it's a waking dream and that it can be a little lucid if you let it be, and the trick is not to try to do it like you think you can do it, but you let it happen because you know it's your higher self that's just shifting it. When you do all of this and you don't have superstitious ideas that say, if I use the right color candle, I'll get money. If you don't have that, then when you do use the right candle, it's way more interesting. To me, it's way more exciting when I do a ritual, whether it be by the book or my own invention or just by the seat of my pants. It's way more interesting if I do a ritual and then within a few days, some miraculous thing happens that fits close enough, like horseshoes and hand grenades close enough, to what I did the ritual for. Then I call it a success. You know, we don't always get what we want, but we get what we need. That's a success to me. Even if I said, Spirit, I need a $10,000 so I can pay my rent and some back due stuff and get out of debt and blah, 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 blah. And instead of giving me that, they just make sure that my bankruptcy doesn't ruin me. And you'll be like, well, I didn't get what I wanted because the Spirit, I didn't get $10,000, but I still get to keep my house, so I guess, it failed. But no, I go, no, it worked. It actually still worked because your fear was losing everything and you didn't. You kept everything. You didn't get the 10,000. Or at least it wasn't a total failure, right? Anyway, guys, this has been a very long video. Hopefully this makes up for the lack of videos for the last couple of weeks. I'll probably do more of these top 5s and top 10s and big 3s and all this kind of stuff it's a good seed for, you know, doing a video. But if you like what I'm doing, if you want to help me out, you can of course subscribe, like, share this video, all that good stuff. Or you can check out the Linktree link in my description, where I've got links to my books, I've got links to my Patreon. If you want to become a student of mine, you can check out Patreon. That's where you can find out how to sign up. You can go to my Etsy store, purchase really cool stuff like this crystal here, which if you put it on a light up stand will look really good, but even if you don't, it still looks really cool. As well as some other cool stuff that comes out from time to time. So if you want to help me out, check out the link in the description. Until next time, mind the shadows.